Question 2 reads, Figure 4 shows the results from an experiment where the potential difference, that is voltage, across a filament lamp was varied. The current and voltage were measured. After the current and the voltage were measured, a graph was drawn. Now this is our graph here. We can see our current in milliamperes in the y-axis and our voltage in volts, that is V, in the x-axis. Okay. Now we are required to describe the relationship between the current and the voltage as shown in the figure. Okay. Now we can go back to our figure and try to see what is our relationship. Okay. Now when solving this question, or when you want to answer this question, what you need to look at is the slope. It's the slope of the graph. By the slope I mean this area here, this line here, we see this line that joins point P and point Q. Okay. After looking at that, you can try and see what is the relationship between the voltage and the current. Now from our figure you can see that there is a positive correlation. Okay, there is a positive correlation. That is, now you can write this down, that is, as the value of the voltage increases, the value of current also increases. Now that we have just deduced from our graph, we can see that, for example, at point P, okay, our value of voltage is 1.0 volts and the current is 20 milliamperes. When we go across, now let's take like this point here, okay, where our value is 3.0 volts, we can see that our value of current has also increased to 40 milliamperes. Next part of the question reads, use the values of the voltage and current at point P and at point Q on the graph in figure 4 to complete the table in figure 5. Now, that is simple. We can just go back to our graph. In our graph, we can see that at point P, our voltage is 1.0 volts, okay, and our current is 20 milliamperes. You can see that here, this and this, that is point P. Now we can move on to point Q. Okay, at point Q we can see it is between 3.0 volts and 4.0 volts, so we can assume that is around 3.5, around this region here. Okay, at 3.5, and it is around 44. Since it's just before the 45 milliampere mark, we can assume it is around here at 44. Okay, now we know that, now from viewing this graph, we know that point Q will be at 3.5, okay, and at 44. We can now transfer these values and write them in the table that we have been provided with. This is our table. We already know that these at 1.0 volts, okay, and at 20 milliamperes, okay, and the point Q is at 3.5 volts and at 44 milliamperes. The next part of the question requires us to calculate the resistance of the filament. The keyword is resistance of the filament lamp when the voltage, we are provided with voltage as 4.5 volts and the current is 51 milliamperes. Use the equation. Now we are given the equation as R, or the resistance is equals to voltage divided by current. Since we already have the values, what we can just do is substitute them into our equation. So that will be R equals to, what is our voltage? 4.5 volts, okay, and our current is 51 milliamperes. Remember, it is in 51 milliamperes. Now we have to convert it into amperes. That will be 51 divided by 1000, or 51 multiplied by 10 raised to power negative 3. When you key in these values into the calculator, you'll get the answer as 88.2 ohms. This symbol here means ohms. The next part of the question reads, explain why the resistance of the filament lamp changes as the voltage across it increases. Now, you remember we are already given this here, okay? We are given that formula. From that, we can see that voltage and resistance have some kind of relationship, and from our question you can see that they are directly proportional, okay? So that means as voltage increases, the resistance across the filament lamp will also increase. So you can explain this as voltage and resistance are directly proportional. That means as voltage increases, resistance across the filament lamp also increases. That will be your first mark, okay? You can also say, because the filament is now the filament will definitely heat up, okay, as the voltage across it increases. It leads to temperature to increase. Finally, for the third mark, that will be your second mark. For the third mark, you can say, as the voltage increases, there are more collisions. among electrons in the filament. This causes the resistance to increase. That will be your third mark. Okay, that is a third explanation that will give you all the marks. That is it for question 2.